started. Thank you everyone for choosing this room, which is a facilitator's guide to finding excuses to connect. And so actually, the first thing I'd like to do with everyone is just to greet each other. So for the people that do have their cameras on, I'm wondering if you could just raise both of your hands and look to the people to the left and right of your video screen and just imagine like you're high-fiving them. And then for everyone that has their video off, you can use the reactions tab to do the clap or that sort of thing too. So anyway, great. I'm glad all of you are here, that we've greeted each other. So as I mentioned, and as Amanda mentioned before, feel free to just keep your video on or off, whatever you prefer. I just want this to be easy and flexible for all of you. And I'd like to start with a quick intention and meditation practice. So feel free to keep your eyes open or closed and just take a deep breath, feeling present with your body and your intention, and thanking yourself for for the gift of coming to this gathering today, of being here today. And open your awareness to sensing the people around you. Even though we're gathering virtually, there's 25 of us all here today, and just feeling that sense of connection. And reminding yourself that it's such a special opportunity to be able to gather together. And with your last breath, you can open your eyes again and just come back to this space. Great. So I will start sharing my slides and I will take you through our session today. Okay, so a bit about myself. My name is Richard Lee Tai. I use he, him pronouns. A few months ago, I had a chance to do a TEDx talk on the topic of how to find excuses to connect, which is outlining how to make meaningful connections easier. And after that, I had the idea, what if I just start an organization called Excuses to Connect, where I can continue promoting this type of connection work. And so I do stuff like coaching, running workshops like these, keynote presentations, and running a podcast. My mission statement is, I make meaningful connections easier because you never know how any connection can transform your life. There's been many instances during my life where meeting the right person at the right time has just opened so many more doors. So I'm a big believer of helping people realize that making connections doesn't have to be as hard as they think it is. And there's a lot of benefit to it. So I'm aware that I'm not the only person doing this type of connection work, but I do have a very unique positioning here where I'm sort of a meta connector. So I'm connecting with connectors and I'm gathering all these different ways and seeing how people are making these connections. Because in one way or another, through storytelling or community building initiatives that I outlined today, all of them, what they have in common is that they're creating an excuse to connect. They're creating the parameters or conditions for these connections to occur. And so the goal of the session today, and what I want all of you to leave with, is hopefully some new connection ideas that you can add to your toolkit as facilitators and practitioners. And this will include stuff like, here we go. This will include stuff like conversation-based card games, weaving connection activities into the design of your events, mini projects to highlight the people in your communities. So hopefully you will leave with creative new ideas that you can utilize to spark meaningful connections. And I have designed this workshop to be interactive, so it's not just me talking at you for the next 45 minutes. I do encourage people to comment in the chat as we're going through, and there will also be places I'm pausing during my presentation to get people's input as well. Okay, let me first start with this model that I have developed called the Excuses to Connect model. It's adapted from another TEDx speaker named Keo Stark, and she has a strategy called triangulation. So in essence, there's you, there's another person, And then there's a third point in between the both of you forming a triangle. The example she gave in her talk, for example, is if there's like a public art sculpture, you and the stranger both notice this, and this becomes a focal point that you can then start talking about. It's like, hey, what do you think of this art piece? I've adapted this idea where I realized the third thing in the triangle can be anything. It's not just a physical object. There's lots of ways that people can create an excuse to connect with one another. You'll also see this dashed line at the bottom, which I have labeled as perceived distance. What I mean by that is oftentimes we find it difficult to connect with people because we perceive that we're distant or there's differences that we need to bridge. For instance, oftentimes I'll see people in positions of authority that have these long lists of titles, these achievements, and I think, why would they ever want to talk with someone like me? And so I perceive that there's a huge gap there. But in reality, when you find an excuse to connect, you're able to lessen that distance because at the end of the day, we're all human and there's some fundamental things that are applicable to all people, such as we all struggle in some way or another. We all want to be seen, heard, and valued, and so on. So this model helps to illustrate that despite perceived distance from two people, there's ways as facilitators and practitioners to develop these excuses to connect with people. So I will get into a number of different examples now. Okay, starting with conversation-based card games. What do I mean by this? So there's a number of brands that sell card games which have questions on them to spark conversations. And this is a very helpful tool that you can use in various contexts, either using it as an icebreaker, a team building activity, as self-reflection prompts for journaling, etc. Really, the sky's the limit in terms of creatively what you might use it for. So I'll start with one of them. One is called Spark, and it's developed by a company called Seek Discomfort. And so it's a deck of 200 question cards. And I have drawn one today for all of us to answer in the chat. So the question is, what cheers you up when you're down? And so if people just want to type in a few quick comments into the chat of the question, what cheers you up when you're feeling down? I'd love to be able to see some responses. Jessica says, my dog, the sun, music, puppy, another son, kids, dog, mountains, phone call, coffee, grandkids. Okay, I see lots of dog lovers here and nature lovers. Going out on my paddleboard, friends, reading, music, biking, napping. Yes, I relate to that, Cindy. Okay, great. So you just saw an example of how you might use a card like this. You can just draw one of these cards and use it at the start of a meeting or as part of your meeting. You'll also see in these two, the image I have on the bottom right here, I actually hosted a full event using these Spark cards. And so I just gathered a bunch of people together. I set out these cards around the room, and then I had them have these conversations using these cards. So you could host a full event using these types of cards as well. Here are some other examples. So I'll start on the left and move to the right. So there's a deck of cards called Big Talk. It's developed by a TEDx speaker named Kalina Silverman, who did a TEDx talk about the topic of big talk as opposed to small talk. And so this is similar to Spark, where it's a deck of question cards. The thing that's different about this is it's pocket sized. So the intention is you could literally put this in your pocket and carry it around with you to start these conversations with people. The one in the middle is called Holsti Reflection Cards. They are double-sided and also color-coded. And so the deck of cards is broken down into different categories that correspond with the color. So for example, there's some questions here around passion and intention and happiness. And so there's different colored cards for that. And it's double-sided, where one side is an easier question and the other side is a deeper question. And so there's flexibility there as well. And then lastly, on the right, there's a game called We're Not Really Strangers. The unique one about this is that it's broken down into 3 different levels of perception, connection, and reflection. And at the end of the game as well, the players are to write a handwritten note and exchange with each other to just recognize the experience they had with each other. The other thing that's unique with this is there's some, besides question cards, there's some wild cards. And so there's some activity prompts there too of like, draw a picture of each other in 30 seconds. There's a paper pad for that. Or switch seats, things like that. So you'll see that the general basis is question cards, and there's a number of ways of using them. I see a question in the chat of Lindsay, where do you get these games? So I have typed in the links there under each of these, but also I believe my presentation will be saved as a PDF afterwards, and these will be clickable links that people can access as well. Okay, so how do you use this? How do you put this into practice? So I have listed one of them already, and I'll list a few more examples, and then I'll pause to get other people's comments. Twyla, I see your question. I'm a big fan of We're Not Really Strangers. I've played it a lot, but I feel like all of them have their own use as well. So as I mentioned, you could run a whole event using these types of cards where you can split the deck into smaller piles and set them at different locations in your space. And then people can go there for a one-on-one or a group chat, and then you can rotate them after a certain amount of time. You could also use this for mixing and mingling. So if you were hosting a physical event and you are having people check in at a registration table, what you could do is give them one of these cards, and then they can carry it around with them as a conversation starter with other people. Then they can either keep their card or exchange it after talking to someone. Here are some other quick ideas. Any of these cards could also be used for self-reflection journaling. So you could set up an event where you draw one or more of these cards and then set a timer for people just to journal about the question. You could also use it to start a meeting as an icebreaker question. And you could also use it as a question of the day or question of the week sort of thing if you have a digital messaging board or email or newsletter. Or if you have a physical space as well, you could post it on a bulletin board as that question of the day or week for people to reflect on. So I'll just do a quick pause here. So I've given some ideas of how you might use this, but if you have any other ideas of how you might use this, feel free to type it into the chat, because I'm sure there's lots of creative minds in the room as well that could see other potential ways you could use these cards. So I'll just give a few moments to see if anyone has any thoughts to contribute, or also feel free to raise your hand using the reactions button, and I can also call on you to say some words. Let's see, I hope I get at least one response, because I'm sure there's more than these 5 examples I've provided. If not, I'll keep going. Feel free to write it on the mural board later or contribute it back in our main room. Oh, I wonder about leaving cards in public spaces for people to find and answer. That is a good idea. As long as I guess you're okay with the cards potentially be returned, because there's just a limited amount that you might need to buy more of, but that's a good idea. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So yeah, team building exercise, speed dating style. Okay, so there's a number of projects that I've come across as well that I've basically categorized as number-based projects. So what I mean by that is people have set out projects to talk with a certain amount of people or to talk with people on a certain frequency. The main one for this, there's a guy named Rob Lawless, and he's doing a project where he's trying to talk with 10,000 people for one-on-one conversations. And so I am number 4,710, and he's over 5,000 now. And so the way he does it is he just encourages people to message him, and he talks with them for an hour, and then shares it on his social media page and website. And from this, there's a number of similar projects that have been inspired by this. So you'll see, again, Rob's profile on Instagram, meeting 10K people, DM me, direct message me if you want to meet. There's another person, his name is Tahir. He's doing a mission to talk with 1,000 people. And then on the right, Marcel, he's doing a project where he's trying to talk with a person from each country within 80 days. He got to 185 countries. And so there's a lot of unique ways to structure a project. There's also my friend Ahmed Jabir. What he did, if you see here, is he created this little sign that says, "I'm Ahmed, I'm from Toronto, I would love to hear your story." And he had this caption on the left where he said he's inspired by Rob. And since he can't meet people and go on adventures during the quarantine, he wanted to meet people, 100 strangers from all around the world. And so he posted this to a Facebook group that had lots of people, and he got hundreds of responses. And then later he ended up creating a TEDx talk on why you should pursue social discomfort, which outlines his experiences talking with all these people. Because through meeting these 100 strangers, he got his dream job, his dream mentor, and he met his girlfriend. So I think it's a very cool story there. Here is one from Calgary. So his name is Tony Estevez. He's living out in Canmore now, but he had done this project called Talk to More People, where his goal was to talk with a stranger each day for a full year. And by the end of that year, he ended up talking with 550 people. And similarly, he posted these stories online, and he also wrote a book about this. So how might you put this into practice? Here are two sort of summarizing the few examples I just gave. One goal I had set for myself and communicated to some of my friend groups is I have a goal of having a face-to-face, either online or digital, conversation with at least one person I don't know well each week. Please message me back if you'd be interested in chatting. And so basically, I don't need to talk with 100 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people. This is a simple way where people can set a goal, or you can set a goal for your community or organization. And it helps. I think the reason it works is because it's a SMART goal. It's specific and measurable, and also in a actionable, relevant, and time-bound way. And people like to help out and be involved with these types of projects. And this leads to my second point here, where if you document and share the process, there's natural momentum that's built up as you share these stories of these connections that you're having, and more people will be interested in participating as well. So I'm also going to take a pause here to see if any people have any other comments or ideas around these number-based projects. And you can type into the chat. How do you address the fear of talking to strangers? That is a good question, Danielle. I think part of it, again, comes to perceived distance, whereas this idea is like the other person's not as different than you are, and chances are yes, the fear of rejection is real. I experience it too. The way I see it is most likely it'll be a pleasant interaction. I lead with the intention and belief that most people are nice, and it would become very clear immediately if they're sort of not open to the conversation. But more often than not, like saying hi to a neighbor or someone in a coffee shop, they're quite willing to chat, and they'll reject you less than you think. But I understand that concern. Okay, I'm gonna, Yes, Twyla, that is a good point. I'm gonna touch on this as we go on. Okay. So I wanted to show you a fun example of what I call a name-based project. So I'll just play the video for you. You can nod your head if you let me know if you can hear it. And you'll understand what she's talking about.
It was a battle of a lifetime in Lincoln today. #JoshFight.
Can you hear it?
Joke. It's very quiet, Richard.
Gotcha. Let me see if I can make it louder. Hmm. How about
Across the
now?
country. Reporter Yusuf
Much better.
Nasser takes us to
Yes.
Lincoln for the unusual Josh fight that brought people from all over the country.
It was an absolute Josh pit at Lincoln Air Park on Saturday. Big Josh, Spider Josh, Little Josh, a plethora of Joshes gathered from all over the country to compete in the ultimate showdown.
I'm coming from Minnesota.
I'm coming all the way from Dallas. So I'm from Omaha.
I'm from Wichita, Kansas. I drove 4.5 hours to be here.
And of course, the man who started it all, Josh Swain of Arizona.
I'm feeling pretty insane right now. It's kind of out of body right now. I honestly couldn't really tell you. I have probably a billion thoughts going through my head at the moment.
A year ago, Swain took to Facebook and challenged as many Josh Swains as he could to a battle royale. The winner would earn the right to keep the name. As the idea went viral, Swain decided to use the opportunity to contribute to charity, the Lincoln Food Bank, and the Children's Hospital and Medical Center. Josh Swain of Omaha took a year to prepare and competed in an epic duel of rock, paper, scissors, best of 3. They tied 3 times straight, but the original Josh Swain emerged victorious.
I found another Josh Swain. That was amazing. Did not expect that to happen. And I came out on top.
That's when the real competition began. Joshes from all over gathered in a circle to compete in a noodle fight. After an intense competition, the tiniest competitor, 4-year-old Josh Vincent Jr. of Lincoln, affectionately known as Little Josh, came out victorious.
I always fight everyone.
Little Josh spoke with Channel 8 after his victory.
How much fun did you have out there today?
A lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Oh, it's pretty awesome, man. He's gonna remember this for the rest of his life.
So, this was called the Josh fight, and it was started out of pandemic boredom by a Josh Swain. And I had a chance to interview him on my podcast, actually. So what he did is he had just found a bunch of people with the same name as him, put them in a Facebook group and said, let's battle for the right to use this name. And this ended up becoming a huge community event in Lincoln, Nebraska, which, as they mentioned, meant they raised food for their local food bank and children's hospital there. So I just wanted to show you this as just a silly, fun example that there's lots of ways to bring people together. Okay, Twyla, this will touch on your point that you had put in the chat earlier. So I call this Get a Dog project. So how often have you seen a stranger approach another stranger and just ask if they can pet their dog? Dogs are an excuse to connect because it just breaks down these social barriers. So I thought there are ways that I could design it as though you had a dog. So how could you get other people to approach you? And so I had created this sticker design, which ended up becoming a banner as well, of if you're reading this, come say hi. So it is an excuse to connect. People can put it on their laptops or their water bottles. And then I had one adult education association in Crow's Nest Pass said, hey, I'd love to just print this out, like print out this design and bring it to community markets for our programming so that people will approach us and have these types of conversations. So that's an example of a Get a Dog project. Here is Molly Kay. She runs a project called Turned Out Tuesdays. And so every Tuesday, she'll dress in this very fancy vintage clothing and with the intention that to spark conversations, that people will approach her and say, well, why are you dressed up that way? Or you have a really nice dress. And she intentionally does this as a way of creating these connections. On the right here, you also see that she had created all these little plastic flowers, and as a flower lady, went out into her neighborhood and handed these out for people as well. Here's a quick video from Jeremy Green. He runs a project called Jeremy Talks to Strangers. And one of the main thing he does is wears a free hug shirt or carries around a free hug sign. And that's his way of connecting with people and bringing them to him. Okay, the next one, as I flip the slide, it's going to play a video as well from a girl named Marissa Mize, and she did a project called No More Lonely Friends.
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 Marissa said goodbye to fake friends and started a nationwide movement.
We are having our first friend picnic meetup,
and that's when No More Lonely Friends was born.
It creates a safe space for new friendships to form.
Never expected more than, 20, 30 people. It's a free event. Everyone is welcome, no matter what age, and I just would love for more people to know and just feel welcome as everybody else does.
Creating like a whole safe space for people to make friends and branch out of their comfort zone, take something bad and make it great.
May meet up at your meetup. We don't know, but we may.
Turning strangers into friends is how you make friends. People are craving that love and attention and friendship and connection with people.
I love you guys. Thank you so much.
No more lonely friends.
So Marissa is based in New York City, and she had created this movement called No More Lonely Friends, and that's how she brands her events. And also she had created some merch for it as well. So you'll see the front and back of the hoodie here, where it says, if you're reading this, we should be friends. So again, it's along the same principle of getting a dog. Okay, how might you put this into practice? So if we're looking at this underlying principle, it's creating some physical way for people to come talk to you. So a simple way you could do this, because you don't need to print out a whole sign or get merch, you can just use a poster board and marker and write a message with a call to action. So whether it's free hugs or come say hi, or if you're reading this, or ask me anything. And this is an easy way that you can set up in a public space for people to come feel like they're invited to come chat. The other one here is to stand out. So you saw from Molly Kay's example, she wears really bright vintage clothing. So you could do that, or it could be a silly hat or mismatched socks or some costume that will just pique people's interest. So you don't feel like you need to approach people. People will just come approach you if you stand out in that sort of way. Okay, I'm going to keep going forward just for the sake of being mindful of time. There's another whole category of projects as well under storytelling. I see I have the same caption here, which is not correct. So ignore the top because we are done talking about dogs. But if you see on these two photos I have here, I started a project at my home University of Lethbridge called Humans of ULeth, where I interviewed students, professors, and staff there and shared their stories online. And on the right, you'll see a collage on my wall of all the people that I ended up interviewing. And just as a reminder of, yeah, all these connections and that everyone has a story to tell. So this is inspired by Humans of New York, where this photographer, Brandon Stanton, did the same thing of interviewing strangers in New York. And now his page has like millions of followers, and it's spawned other movements around the world. For example, there's also Humans of Calgary and Humans of whatever location, whether it's a city or institution.
This is Street Connect, a project that I started to bring more purpose and connection into New York City life. And I do that by having conversations with strangers.
Yeah, so how old are you?
I am 36.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Is that surprising? Like, do I look younger, older?
It's so hard to tell. It really is. Well, I wouldn't have had a clue.
I'm 36. I have 4 kids.
No. Okay, see, that I would not have known either.
And I've been living in New York City for about 14 years.
How old are your kids?
They are 6, 8, 10, and 12.
Okay, mine is 15.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So you're in a, a different phase than me. How is that like to have a teenager?
It's tough because they're so torn. I mean, they want to be by themselves and like go to these parties, like a party that starts at 9:30 at night. I'm like, no, I'm sorry.
It's bedtime.
That's when you should be starting to come back.
Right.
No way. And then they also still want mama.
Can you tell me about your greatest?
So this is a project called Street Connect, also in New York City. It's run by my friend Janelle Hill. And so what she does is approach strangers in parks and records these conversations to share online. So the way she does it is she'll stop people and ask, hey, would you have time to sit down for a meaningful conversation? And sometimes people are a bit reluctant to it, but she'll explain what she's doing it for. And really, she just wants to give people her space and presence and her listening ear, just to have a meaningful conversation. And what she does is she sits people down on a bench just so it's more, they're sitting down, they're calm, they're having the intention to chat with each other. And she starts it with allowing the other person to ask a question first. And so in this case, this person asks like, how old are you? And so Janelle answered all that. And then Janelle will go on to ask a question to this other lady. So this is an example of a storytelling project. I'll pause here quickly. This is by Brandon Doman called the Strangers Project. And so he'll have these pop-up activations where he'll have paper there and he wants to collect people's stories as well. So you'll see his sign here, which is actually, this also fits in the get a dog principle, but hi there, I'm collecting your stories. Stop and share anonymously, or just ask hi, or what is this for? And so I'll just play this video so you can see what it looks like. Okay, and on the right, you'll see, it's okay if you can't read the text, but you'll see that he gets all these handwritten notes about people telling their stories, and then he'll scan them and share them on his pages as well. So you'll see someone drew this beautiful tree and a little message here. Okay, how might you put this into practice, this principle here? So you could create a humans of whatever community, organization, neighborhood, etc. you're part of, and start capturing their stories and sharing them on social media or newsletters on your workplace, however you'd like to do that. Sparking these conversations, so you can start conversation with these strangers. Also, what you can do, if you combine this with what I said earlier of conversation-based card games, instead of just approaching a stranger random, like without any sort of prompt, you can say, oh, I have this card game with questions on it. I'm wondering if you would be willing to answer one of these questions. So that can be your excuse to connect in. You can also create a story wall, which is this principle that Brandon Doman just used. You can just create some prompt and give people some paper, and then they can write down their response or their story. And then you can just add it to some wall or other surface to create a collage. Yes, the Human Library Project. That is a good one as well. There's so many more examples that I wish I could put into this presentation, but then we'd be going for hours and hours, so I try to be more concise. But the Human Library Project is a good one too, where basically people act as human books, and people can sign out a book and have a conversation about that person's lived experiences. Okay. So just as some general connection activities that I'd still just want to offer before we close out soon. Again, with my Humans of ULF team, I had hosted a few different activities to really illustrate and connect people on a deeper level. So let's see if this one pops up. Okay. I was inspired by an event that Humans of U Calgary hosted, where they had blindfolded conversations. So I'm just going to pay you a quick snippet of what their event looked like and then how I adapted it. Okay, so there you saw people were blindfolded, placed into these pairs for them to have conversations. And the whole idea there is that, they're sort of withholding their judgment or their impressions just based on people's appearance. And so they can really tune into their conversation with others. And so the way I had adapted that, instead of buying many bandanas or blindfolds, I had a friend that had 3D glasses, from those movie theaters, and we just spray painted them black. And so it still fulfills the same purpose of, when they wear it, they can't see the other person. And so you'll see pictures from this event I hosted a few years back. An activity I did at this event as well is around physical connection. So I had participants sit back to back and just trying to see if they can feel each other breathing. And then I asked them to see if they can sync their in-breaths and out-breaths with each other. It's interesting because it's like, even, I think especially during the pandemic when we've been physically distanced and isolated from each other, running some activity like this, if people are comfortable, of course, I think can be a very special experience and a simple way to facilitate. An alternative to this is you can ask people to touch like they can just touch hands or like touch feet. It doesn't necessarily have to be back to back, but having these a physical connection point is helpful. And then this last one here, I call a web of connections. And so the way I facilitate this is I have everyone stand in a circle and I have a ball of yarn that is tossed from person to person. So each participant answers a question that I've determined as the facilitator. So in this event, I had asked them what's something they're struggling with right now. And then people in the circle, whoever's holding the yarn would answer that question. And if anyone relates to that, they would say same or me too, I feel that same way. And then the ball of yarn is tossed to that person and so on and so forth until everyone has a piece of the yarn. And so it's a really nice visual symbolism of seeing all these connections that are tying people together. And then at the end, I take a pair of scissors, I go around, I cut all the yarn, and they can keep their piece of yarn as a reminder that even though they can't see these connections anymore, they're still invisibly connected with one another. And they can keep that as a reminder. Okay, it's coming up on the hour. I feel like I've given lots of content, so I can still pause if there's any questions, but I'll go to my last slide here, where there's my contact information at richard@excusestoconnect.com, and there's my website as well, where you can check out my podcast and other work, and then LinkedIn and Instagram as well. So I'll just wait until we get kicked back to the main room, I guess. So if people have any other comments or questions, we can have time for that.
Richard, I might say something if that's okay.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, you reminded me of something that I'm trying out. I work in 2 seniors buildings, and it's so true that dogs and animals in general, but dogs really bring people together. And I'm doing something called a puppy party, where I literally am having people from the community bring in dogs just to have the residents pet them. And it's amazing the results. So thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So people, you can host a puppy party. Any other comments, questions? I see some thank yous in the chat, so I appreciate being able to run this with folks. Daniela, do you know when we're heading back?
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Richard. This was
Yes,
wonderful.
for sure.
And we will be having Richard's PowerPoint saved so that we can refer back to it later. So everyone has the opportunity now to take about a 10-minute break.